Before we get to this week's episode, I'd like to remind you all that my book, The Anxious Person's Guide to Non-Monogamy, is available through most major bookstores. It would be lovely if you would purchase it through the Jessica Kingsley Publishers website. Just do a little Google. It's a great book for people brand new to non-monogamy or people who have tried it for a while and need a little bit more structure. You can head to nonmonogamyhelp.com/book for more details and to show an interest in the audiobook, which would be really, really helpful to me. If you've bought it and read it, please give it a rating or review on Amazon. If you don't mind, that's also very helpful. Thank you so much for your support. Let's get to this week's episode.
Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello, and welcome to episode 93 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. I'm Lola Phoenix. Please send your questions to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com, and I will answer them in the podcast or the column anonymously. You're free to let me know which one you would prefer. And you can also read the columns and listen to the podcast at nonmonogamyhelp.com. Subscribe to the email newsletter by going to go.nonmonogamyhelp.com/email. And you can follow the accounts on Twitter and Instagram at nonmonogamyhelp.com. Or just non-monogamy help. Look at me. Anyway, if you want to support the column or the podcast and the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you'd become a patron on Patreon. And yeah, that would be awesome. If you want to support them, you can do that. Even just $1 a month is really helpful for me. It helps me just give a general vote of support. It helps me afford the cost of producing it. You can do that by going to patreon.com/Lola Phoenix. If you donate $5 or more a month, your name with your permission will be read at the end of the podcast. Now, let's get to this week's discussion question. If this is the first episode you've listened to, every week I introduce a discussion question before I read the letter, and it's something that you can use with your friends, partners, anyone you want to get to know a little bit more, and I also answer it myself briefly to give you a little bit of context. This week's discussion question is, how would you feel if a metamour did not want to meet you? For me personally, I don't think I would care necessarily because I prefer to practice a kind of parallel polyamory more or less than any kitchen table style, or basically I don't necessarily have to meet my metamours at all. If they really don't want to meet me, that's fine. And if they have strong feelings about not wanting to meet me, I'm perfectly fine with that too. I just don't necessarily see it as a requirement. I'm fine to meet them if they want to. We can have a chat. But what I really don't want is to be forced or feel forced to have a friendship with them when we don't really have anything in common, or the only thing we have in common is that we're dating the same person. I have been in situations in my life where I've forced myself to try to be more friends with a metamour than I normally would be with anybody else, and that made me really tense and really unhappy. So I'm never ever doing that again. So yeah, I'm not really picky. I'm not really bothered by it. But it's always a good thing to discuss, especially if you're just starting out, because it can happen and you don't want for it to happen and you and your partner to have really different views about it, because that will make things a little bit more difficult than the situation is already. So yeah, the discussion question is, how would you feel if a metamour did not want to meet you? Let's get to this week's letter. I find myself very confused in this quote-unquote relationship. I have been hanging out with my friend Jay for over 3 years. We are not in a relationship, but are friends with benefits. We have both established that we have strong feelings for each other, and we are open to a non-monogamous relationship. I have known for years that he has another relationship with someone else, which I am fine with, and I am willing to be in a relationship with her as well. Unfortunately, the other woman is 10 years younger than we are and has jealousy issues and is not willing to meet with me yet. I know in my heart I have very strong feelings for this man. I do not know if I love him, but it is very strong. He does not garner the same strong feelings as I do, but cares very deeply for me. He has also expressed it is my decision to leave the situation we are in. I find I am extremely happy with him and only look forward to the time with him, but my feelings of not being able to be with him fully without her yet hurts me. Is it wrong for wanting to leave an amazing friendship because of strong feelings? I've tried to leave my feelings at the door, but it is hard. Before we get to this week's answer, I'm going to quickly plug this episode's sponsor, BetterHelp. Quite often in my columns and podcasts, I encourage people to seek a polyamory-friendly therapist, and everyone really should consider seeing a therapist. I think it would be a good option for almost everyone. But for a lot of people looking locally for a therapist who understands polyamory might be impossible or out of your budget. BetterHelp allows you to find therapists online that you can send messages to at any time of the day, and they do offer some financial aid. You can get 10% off your first month by using the promo code Non-Monogamy Help at checkout or going to betterhelp.com/non-monogamy help. Let's get to this week's answer. The first thing that I would ask is, what's behind this request? Why do you need to meet her in order to be with him? Where is this request coming from? Is this only coming from you? Or is this also something that he's said is a sign that you're together? Because she doesn't necessarily have to want to meet you. And just because she doesn't want to meet you doesn't mean she has jealousy issues. I'm not sure if that's something that you've picked up because of some other things that have happened, or if you're assuming that she doesn't want to meet you because she has jealousy issues, or if she's said she doesn't want to meet you because she's jealous. Either way, she doesn't have to meet you necessarily if she doesn't want to. And he also doesn't have to have you meet her to care about you or to be in a relationship with you. So I think that there is more to this than meets the eye. And there is something that you want or something that you're afraid of, which you're not really tackling. And you're kind of using this obstacle of meeting this person instead of maybe facing what the real problem is. Is the real problem that you haven't defined your relationship and you are friends, but you haven't really established that you're a couple, whereas it seems like he's actually established that with this other person. And the thing that kind of confuses me a little bit is that, and it may be like just your wording in terms of like how you've said this, but you said that, you know, we have strong feelings for each other and we're open to a non-monogamous relationship. I've known for years that he has another relationship with someone else. Is the other woman interested in a non-monogamous relationship? Are they non-monogamous? Because if she's monogamous, then I absolutely understand why she doesn't want to meet you. And I won't blame her for that. But it's not really clear what's going on right here, whether or not they are already in a non-monogamous relationship, how long that relationship has lasted, what that relationship has been like. There are all sorts of different complications as to why she may or may not want to meet you. But what is it that you want? And why is it that you feel that meeting her is an essential part of your relationship with him? Because it isn't really. Now, you may want a kitchen table style of polyamory. If you're unfamiliar with that means, kitchen table polyamory basically is a setup where all of the Metamours meet, everyone meets everyone's partners, and everyone sort of gathers around the kitchen table, as it were, as a big family. And that's not a bad thing to want. I'm not saying that you're wrong to want to meet her, or you're even necessarily wrong to feel like your relationship isn't established until you have. That's absolutely fine to want and need as a person. What I'm saying is that that may not be what they want. That may not be what she wants. That may not be what he wants. And it doesn't seem like he's given you an understanding of why she doesn't want to meet up. It doesn't really seem like he's taken a side here, which is okay. Like, are his thoughts that he doesn't have any strong opinions either way, and she doesn't really want to meet you, and you do really want to meet her, so the only people who have strong opinions about it are you both, so it's sort of like, well, I don't care either way, so I'm not going to get involved, which is fine? Or does he have an opinion either way? The thing that kind of concerns me about this is that you're not saying what his opinion is about this or how he feels about this. You've just said that he said that you can walk away at any time, which is a kind of crappy thing to say. Like, I'm sorry, but I hope he didn't say it in that way, but to be like, well, you can walk away at any time. It's your decision to leave. I mean, yes, it is your decision to leave, and yes, you should leave if you really want a kitchen table style of polyamory or non-monogamy, and they do not. But to be, like, lackadaisical about it is kind of a jerk move, and I hope that maybe this is just me interpreting you wrong in terms of how he's gone about this. So, I think that in general, you probably shouldn't base your relationship with him on a relationship with her, and I don't necessarily think that polyamory or non-monogamy inherently means that you have a friendship with your metamour or that you even meet them. If that's what you want, that's fine, but hopefully you aren't deciding that this relationship is not full until you meet somebody else or they become friends with you, which isn't something that you can control. You could meet her and you have absolutely nothing but the fact that you're dating the same person in common, and therefore a friendship really wouldn't work very well. And as I've said before in, the discussion question we just had, you shouldn't really force yourself to try and be friends with someone that you don't really have anything in common with. Now, maybe you're the kind of person that can be friends with anyone and it doesn't really bother you, and that's fine, but maybe she's not. So there's all kinds of different things going on here. I kind of wonder if the reason why you care so much about this is because you don't really have an established relationship with him. You clearly have a lot of feelings about him, and for whatever reason, he doesn't have the same feelings for you. So maybe you're kind of pushing for this as some type of way of securing yourself or making yourself feel a little more anchored. Because if you met her, then maybe you would be a little bit more of an established relationship in his life. And I don't know is that pushing so hard to meet with her is necessarily going to solve this. I am a little bit worried by the fact that you say you feel strongly and he doesn't, and I don't know why it is that you feel he doesn't feel as strongly for you. If he's outright said that, or if this is just something that you're gathering from your own personal observance. I think that sometimes it's easy for people to assume that their feelings are stronger than their partners, especially when their partner is not as expressive as they are, which isn't necessarily the case. If you're assuming that he doesn't feel as strongly about you, either because you haven't met this other partner he has or because he isn't as expressive, then I don't think that you should. However, if you feel he doesn't love you as much as you love him because he doesn't do things for you or doesn't give you time or doesn't meet your needs, then that is a bigger issue that meeting this other person is not going to solve. So I think that you need to think about this a little bit more and ask yourself why it is you want to meet her. What will change about your relationship if you do, and why? Do you feel comfortable with the fact that you know you feel stronger than he does? How does that make you feel? Where do you feel this relationship is going? Where do you want it to go? Does he share that vision with you? Because even if you're just friends with benefits, and that's fine, if you both share the same vision of what you want the relationship to eventually be, then that's okay. It doesn't have to be established, it doesn't have to follow all of the rules. But if you think that this will turn into something that is a different type of relationship that involves more time commitment from him, more emotional commitment from him, or something else, and he doesn't share that vision, then maybe this anxiety about meeting this metamour is not really about meeting the metamour. It's about the fact that maybe you're feeling like you don't share the same vision for how you want this relationship to go about eventually. So yeah, to recap, I think that this is about more than just meeting your metamour. And in general, I think if you're going to go down the route of polyamory, understanding what style you want is really important, and making sure that if you want the style of polyamory where you definitely meet metamours and you definitely have a friendship, that's something that you have to make clear from the beginning and share, both of you, because for a lot of reasons and not necessarily jealousy issues, people don't always want to meet their metamours, and that's perfectly valid. They don't have to. It doesn't have to define your relationship, and I would personally be quite annoyed if someone demanded to be friends with me and stated that they couldn't have a full relationship with my partner until they were friends with me. I would find that really awkward for me personally, but how you want to do it is fine, but you need to understand it and you need to know enough about it to ask for it. I think that maybe this anxiety about meeting this metamour has more to do with the instability of your current relationship and the fact that you feel more for your partner than he does for you, and maybe you want more from him than he wants to give you. And so maybe you need to have a discussion about where you all think this relationship will eventually evolve into or not evolve into. And if you don't share a vision of that, or if you want more than he is willing to give, then it's at this point that you may need to make the decision to find a relationship that will give you what you want instead of just staying in this because you're getting a little bit of what you want, and that satisfaction is only going to last you so long. Last but not least, I think that you should in the future consider avoiding trying to define your relationship with someone by things that involve third parties. I mean, I understand if you want to meet your metamours. I understand if you want to be friends with them. I understand if that brings you closer to your partner in some ways, and I'm not trying to criticize that. But just understand that there's only so much that you can control when it comes to that. And you may have a fantastic, wonderful relationship with someone who is dating someone who doesn't want to meet you, and that is also possible. And there doesn't have to exist only this one future where you have a wonderful partner and then also a metamour who you get along with fantastically. Like, I think that you can have a good partner and a good bond with them without it having anything to do with anyone else that they date. And that might be something you want to open yourself up to as an option. Just so what I'm trying to avoid here for you is you don't break up good relationships that you have with people because they're dating people who just don't necessarily want to have a friendship with you for whatever reason, when that relationship that you have with that person might be really good and really beneficial for you. In the same ways that monogamous people can kind of get suckered in by Disney films and not necessarily Disney, but all media, and the idea that like their partner's always going to be there for them in terms of being perfect, and they're always going to have a passionate relationship and there's never going to be any ups and downs. That's really unrealistic. And if a monogamous person goes into a relationship and believes it because it's not got that constant passion, then they have been suckered into a false ideal. And my worry is that maybe at some point you have been sort of not led into a completely false ideal, but you're led into a belief that there will be this kind of idealistic scenario where you always get along with your metamours. And maybe that will happen, and that can happen. But don't throw away something good that you have just because that doesn't happen. And in this case, this isn't about meeting the metamour. I feel this is about something that's a little bit more. And there are things within your own relationship that you might want to pay attention to, like the fact that he doesn't seem to have the same kind of feelings that you have, and you both haven't really sat down to talk about your relationship, where you want it to go, if you want it to go anywhere. And that is probably what's bringing you more anxiety than necessarily the metamour. So yeah, I hope that helps, and good luck. Thank you for listening to episode 93 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. If you want to be awesome, you can donate to my Patreon. Donating $5 or more means your name with your permission will be read at the end of the podcast. This week's current amazing, awesome patrons are Laura Boylan, Chris Albury Jones, Juke, Ellen Robertson, Nikki Jones, James Wartell, Leo Yucky, and Tyler Teekno. If for whatever reason you can't become a patron, because I get it, you don't always have the money for it. Is it a recession? There's shit going down, okay? And I get it. That's fine. You can also rate and review the podcast on iTunes. I know that you can do this, and if you do this, please let me know, especially if you write a review, because Apple doesn't notify me about that, and I'm still mad about it. I'm going to be mad about it every single podcast because I really think that it's stupid. So please let me know if you give me a review. If you have 5 minutes to spare, I'd really appreciate it. If you don't review, that's fine. A rating is also super helpful. That's all for this week. You will get a new column next Friday and another podcast episode in a fortnight. Thank you again for listening. You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. Our podcast music has been provided by Chris Albury-Jones at albury-jones.com, and the art was made by Dom Jung at domduong.com. Thank you for listening.